Sounds good.
I'm not sure why it's not showing up on this monitor, but I think we're streaming and everything and recording.
Go ahead. Good evening. I'm calling the Monday, February 13th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting to order. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. All right, first item on the agenda this evening is the approval of tonight's agenda. Do I have any requests for changes? Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? Agenda is approved. Moving on, we have the minutes from the meeting held way back in December 12th, 2022. Do you have any requests for changes to the minutes or concerns about the minutes? All right, seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve the Planning Commission minutes dated December 12th, 2022.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second to
I'll
approve?
second.
Second, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Moving on, we have two public hearings this evening. Looks like the first one is Bluffs at 9 Mile Creek sign variance. This is a request for variance to allow two freestanding signs in the RM-2.5 zoning district. Will the proponent of the project please come forward? Good evening.
Good evening.
If you would, state your name for the record and tell us about your project, your request, please.
Yes, my name is Myrna Orenstein. I'm with Imaginality Designs. I did the plan for Bluffs at 9 Mile Creek. So the sign variance request is for the second sign, which is an entrance monument to the Bluffs at 9 Mile Creek. Let's see which direction we're going to be going. The Bluffs is a 10-acre site with 191 units, and it was built in the early 2000s, about 2003. It has about 1,500 feet of frontage along Flying Cloud. On Valley View Road, it has about 570 feet, which has no signage. And there's an existing sign at the corner of Valley View and Flying Cloud Drive, which faces one direction. What we are asking is to have an entrance monument, which is double face, which ends up in the middle of the property. So it's about 700 feet from one direction, about 800 feet from the other direction, so that there's actually, so are you doing the pointer? Yeah. You get the pointer for where the direction actually is. That's the right direction. So this leads you along a curve. So in here we have the 1,500, the dotted line represents the full frontage along Flying Cloud. So you've got 800 from the top if you were coming from Shady Oak around that frontage road. And if you were coming from the corner the other direction, Oops, we lost our presentation.
It's still on my screen. Yeah, there we go.
Aha, there we go. So right here is the corner, so then you're driving along, takes a little ways. I actually have two of these. Then on the next one, this is coming from the other direction, where you get a little glimpse if you're looking up to see the edge of the building, but pretty much you come around the corner, you don't see anything, then you see the edge of the building, and again, you're across from an office industrial park, so there's no other residential in the area from when you see it, and then all of a sudden, you're at the entrance. This particular slide shows the actual entrance from the overhead view, and the challenge at this entrance just happens to be the distance in the setback. So what is displayed here is where the sign may be positioned, and so the city helped us in locating, there's a private storm line, so we have our 5-foot setback from it's about where the property line is from the sidewalk. There's a 10-foot setback from the property line for where the sign can be located. So we've looked at locating the sign as tightly as we can and as close to the drive. Again, we want to make sure that people have that awareness of where to enter the property, because when you do enter the property, you come up a steep hill. So we've done our best to locate it in that area, and then we'll look at locating landscape, making sure that our sight lines are available. Currently, there had been a temporary sign that was not to be there, but that's what has been existing. That sign will be taken down. It's not an allowed sign, but they have not had something there for an entrance. So our sign will be beyond that sign and within that storm line, so we'll have to be very careful on locating it. So we've kept our size within the requirements of the code, and it really does serve as to get somebody into the entrance, and it has the address on it as well. Again, we've tried to do what we could to position it sort of in a semi-realistic way from each direction so you could see it. And in the upper right-hand box, you can see as somebody would approach it, it's a difficult sight line, but again, we're going to be adjusting the landscape as well and lighting onto the sign so that it will be visible so that somebody wouldn't miss that turn. So that's really our request, is to have a reasonable sign sized at the entrance, double face, perpendicular to the road, to make sure that that entrance isn't missed. That's our request.
Thank you. Any initial questions? Okay. Thank you. Planners report?
Thank you, Chair, Commission. We've reviewed this application for based on the standards for variance as required by state statute, and we find that the variance can be supported from a standards standpoint. The property is unique in the sense that one of the standards needs to be that the property needs to be have a uniqueness component, so that not every property in the city can have an extra sign in this case. In this situation, due to the location of the existing sign at a prominent intersection as 800 or so feet away, plus the single driveway kind of further away that you can't see from that major intersection, it seems to support the need for additional wayfinding to get to the site, in particular for first responders and folks like that. Other kind of factors, the second sign won't impact negatively the neighborhood. Properties to the west and south are zoned office and industrial. They are allowed 2 signs, so passersby won't necessarily know that this is a non-conforming situation. And the applicant is not proposing a proliferation of signs, more just a minimum necessary to kind of get their goal in terms of access or visibility towards the entrance and access for the drivers that go by. Lastly, the second sign is reasonable in kind of the eyes of the code, and so staff can support this variance request as drafted.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the city?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Fart?
I have a few. Will there be a requirement for the applicant to submit a revised landscaping plan prior to the permit being issued? They talked about landscape replacement. Is that just going to be done on the fly, or is that going to be documented?
If they do need to remove landscaping, in particular the trees in that area, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. If they do plan on removing landscaping, we will want to see revised landscaping plans to show, as you say, demonstrate where that replacement trees would be located.
Okay, great. And does this site have the opportunity to have other permittable signs on it, like a wall sign or something like that?
Wall signs are permitted in this district, yes.
Okay. Should we be considering a condition of approval whereby this variance would restrict their opportunity to have another sign, like a wall sign?
Mr. Chair, you certainly could consider that. Staff isn't recommending that in part because due to the location of the building, it's quite a bit higher than the road in this area, and it's set further back. Plus, the kind of mature landscaping here does limit the options to put it on the building. Plus, other uses within the zoning district would allow both, and this modest second sign we don't think negates or creates a proliferation of sign where you would want to pull back some rights that they are already allowed. So you can certainly consider that, but we wouldn't recommend that.
Okay, all right. I'll bring that up for discussion later. And then maybe an odd question, but since in your staff report you mentioned that the corner sign at Valley View and Flying Cloud was a permitted sign, and there's a non-conforming sign at this entrance right now, and that's really where the sign needs to be, I can understand, right here at the driveway. Is there a way that if we approve this variance, that this new sign at the driveway becomes the primary sign and in other words, we turn the table on the nonconformity over to the corner so that in case one or the other goes away or a change in owners, I don't know what circumstances would arise for that, but I'm just wondering, on the books, is this going to be known as the sign with the variance and nonconforming?
The variance reflects the staff report,
Yeah.
which reflects this sign in this location.
Okay,
While they can change the design in the future,
Yeah.
they are limited to the 36 square feet in the general location. I'm not so worried about this sign being made larger, over the years, just
Right.
because of space. They don't have the area for that.
yeah, I was just wondering if one of them had to go away in the future, and I can't imagine what that circumstance would be. I'd rather have this new one here at the driveway because it seems very appropriately placed.
If the property owner could, of course, alter their plans in the future, but they would be allowed 2 signs, one of which would be at this entrance location.
Thank you.
Other questions for the city? All right, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to come forward and speak for or against this project, please do so now. Not seeing anyone, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing and further discuss.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All right, motion and second to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, public hearing's closed. Further discussion. Commissioner Meady.
I support this request for a variance because I feel it does fall within that unique circumstances kind of situation where the existing sign right now is at there's such a huge topography change. There's that building's at least like 30 feet higher and just so much further away and the entrance is so far away from that corner that I think this is just gonna help people find the address. So I think it falls within that kind of unique circumstance that I don't think that would necessarily reverberate to, you know, a whole ton more properties coming and requesting something like this, because I think that this is rare. So, yeah, I support it.
I concur with Commissioner Meddy and believe that this is unique enough circumstances to allow a second sign. And I'm sensitive to the sign proliferation issue, and Eden Prairie has been very much focused on that. But I don't think this is a place where we have to worry about that. So I support it as well.
I agree, Mr. Chair. Certainly, I think this is even a better location, like I said before, from the sign at the corner for wayfinding to get people up that only driveway into the facility. I just brought up my other issue to the planner based on, I think it was years ago, maybe when the building got built, or maybe when leasing was low on it or slow. I think the applicant, or, well, the owner put up a tall banner sign on the top of the building, leasing now, or units available, or something like that, facing Highway 62. And I don't know if there's a temporary permit that goes along with that or not, or maybe they just put it up. I can't say for sure one way or the other. So I just didn't want there seems to be already some signage creep on the property, and I think that just better communication with staff would have helped out in both those circumstances. But I think the sign is aptly placed and sized.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I also agree with with what the commissioners has said about having two signs. I should have asked this earlier, but as far as lighting for the signs at night, is there a specification or requirement for the lighting, if there's going to be lighting for both signs?
I'd have to double check the code, but my understanding is lighting can't create light or glare on passersby, including traffic and on the sidewalk. So I can confirm that, but I understand that that's at least the minimum.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or discussion on this? Entertaining a motion on this proposal?
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the variance to allow a second freestanding signs at the RM-2.5 zoning district as requested in the February 13th, 2023 staff report.
All right, I have a motion from Commissioner Kirk for approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Meddy. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Would anyone like to abstain? All right, great. Thank you for your presentation this evening. It's moving forward. All right, our second public hearing this evening is for Giarderini retaining wall variance. Request for a variance to allow construction of a new retaining wall within the 75-foot shore impact zone. The proponent would come forward and please state your name for the record and tell us about your request, please.
Hi, my name is Robert Guidarini. I'm requesting the variance. I'm requesting two variances, one to construct a retaining wall within the required 150-foot shore setback and within the 75-foot shore impact zone. Second variance I'm requesting is for the hardcover, the impervious surface. After running the calculations, we're going from a 32% impervious down to 31%. While it's not at the 30% that the city deems maximum, we are getting closer. A couple things about me. I'm a resident of Eden Prairie for 23 years. We purchased a single-family home in 2013 that was built in 1986. We started working with GeoWall Designs in 2019 to determine the structural engineering, the geo surveys, the landscaping, to figure out how to support or replace the existing retaining wall. Our property is special in that there's very little space in order to build or bring materials in. I'll kind of talk about that in a bit. From 2019 to now, we've worked with Watershed District, the DNR, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Natural Conservation Offices, as well as the City of Eden Prairie to try and meet all the requirements required for the retaining wall. So to give you a perspective of where this location is, this is on Mitchell Lake. It's kind of what we call the pond area that feeds off into the lake. And to talk about some of the wall complexities, after performing the geo survey, we determined that the soil makeup underneath the house and 30 feet down into the water table is for the most part sand, which brings about some complexities of dealing with the wall. The use of gravity walls wasn't an option because it impedes against the shoreline between the wall and the water. Timber wall's been moving, it's been bulging, separating at the joints, and it's an immediate need for reinforcement. We actually have our lower deck of our house that started to pull away from the house because the lower deck is sitting on top of the retaining wall at the edge. And like I said, there's limited space for access equipment and materials. And so our options were pretty limited. This survey here, the lines in red are the walls that we are proposing to remove. There's a lower garden wall that was built before we had purchased the house. Those lower garden walls will be pulled out, but it also demonstrates or shows that we are reclaiming some of the land between the wall, the main wall, and the water to restore some of the natural shoreland that would have been there before a prior owner had built the garden wall. The solution of the walls, we're going to use soil anchors. So they're going to drive 20-foot long soil anchors at a 20-degree angle. There's going to be about approximately 100 of them that are going to go into the wall, so about 2,000 linear feet of soil anchors. From the soil anchors, they're going to tie geogrid to, and they're going to support a new block wall in front of it. So we actually got one permit to put the soil anchors in. We're requesting the variances in order to get the second permit to build the wall in front. And so some of the things we've done is because we were sensitive to the impervious surface, we're working with two different block manufacturers to see if we can get what's called a shore pour block. Normally a big block comes in a 24-inch depth. We're trying to get manufacturers to make some custom blocks for us that would be roughly around 12 inches in depth. So we have less concrete for the impervious surface. We're moving the garden walls, like I had mentioned, which is going to set the walls or the property of the house further away from the owl. And we've basically gone through a ton of iterations trying to make the wall as cosmetically appeasing as possible, trying to follow all the requirements and constraints from the Watershed District and now the city. And so this is what the new wall layout will look like. The new wall, the big block wall, will be obviously in front of the timber wall. That's going to be secured by the soil anchors. We're going to plant some native species to reclaim some of the sanded beach that exists currently. And like I say, this is after years and years of working with various organizations to come up with a solution that everyone can accept. Some of the benefits tied to the variance is we're eliminating the garden wall. Like I said, we're creating a larger setback. We're also reducing the impervious surface. not quite to the 30%, but less than 1% away from the city limitations. Restoring the beach to some of the native plants, and we're returning stability to the home and the upper and lower deck. Like I say, that's been a major concern as the owner of the property, that we're going to start to see the foundation moving, walls cracking. And so, like I say, we've been working on this now for almost 4 years of planning and trying to get every requirement achieved in order to put this behind us, get the new wall, and move on. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. Any initial questions?
Mr. Chair, yes.
Commissioner Taylor?
I noticed in a couple of your photos, you already show there's movement of your existing deck
Yes.
from the time you've owned the property to
Correct.
current?
Yes.
And second question, you're going to drive piles into the embankment. Have you looked at the option of augering the piles in? And has there been a study because as you start to drive the piles, of course, there's vibration and your neighbors and everything else. Has there been studies to make sure that we don't see any adverse effects by driving piles?
So I brought my engineer with from Wall Designs, Kyle Hurd. He can answer it better than I can.
All right.
My name's Kyle Hurd, Principal Engineer at GeoWall Designs. And so for vibration, the type of nail that we're using, it's a number 6 bar rebar. So the vibration through the sand material is minor. Helicals or ground screws referred to would be an alternate option for it. It just comes with a price tag.
Right.
So you have to balance from our engineering side, disturbance of the area, as well as the cost to the owner.
Correct.
And this was the solution we came up with, which is not necessarily a pile. They're called ground anchors rather than a soil nail, which slight variation, but it's almost a kind of a play on words.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Fark?
So just to follow up on that, are all these ground acres above water table?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so that 20 degree you were talking about is off of the horizon, not 20 degrees off vertical.
20, yeah, from your horizontal.
Great, thanks. For the homeowner, I noticed you had a sample design. You said you were working with a couple different block manufacturers, but the one that you showed to city staff that's in our staff report now is a nice, has a nice face texture to look like some smaller cut stones.
It's on my screen. It'll come up shortly here.
So that's what the soil anchors looks like.
Sure. Oh, thanks. Yep.
And that's the image of the block. It's the same block that's being used at the Wayzata Country Club.
Good, good. I appreciate you showing this picture. The one that was in our staff report just had the silver gray raw concrete, yet unstained. And so I was going to bring up that it really needs to be colored in the field with field stain to differentiate between the stones and the little fake mortar joint so that you get this nice natural stone coloration blending in better with the neighbor's boulder wall and much better image from across the water and whatnot. So that's what I would expect.
We're looking at staining and the options. Right now, it's all about the cost of getting the wall done.
Sure, I can appreciate this is a formidable project for you, I'm sure.
But yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, we live on the lake. We appreciate the lake. And we're doing everything we can to make it as aesthetically pleasing.
Good. Okay, well, my expectation is that it would be stained. I understand there's a cost to that, but for the benefit of everybody looking at your wall towards your house, which isn't you, you're looking out the windows across it. I think that aesthetic is very important, and you've gone to great lengths to select the nice face texture on the blocks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, because one of the things we're considering is growing vines up it as well to soften the walls' appearance.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Mitty.
My microphone's loud today. Okay, this is helpful because I didn't quite fully understand exactly what was happening from the staff report. And just to reiterate, I make sure I'm understanding this. There's the timber wall, and now there's currently this secondary wall that's failing, and that will go away, and it's just gonna all be one big wall. So when we're talking about how it looks and the visuals, I'm kind of thinking, okay, so it's gonna be a very, very large wall now. And yes, it'll look a lot better probably than what's there, but I think that and I think you just mentioned it. That was going to be my comment or question is some plantings, kind of right in front of that wall, small trees or whatever might be the case to soften it. And so I think that is should be done in order to help, again, take away from the scale of the size of that wall. My question on, I don't know if we can pull up the diagram from the presentation, but where you're showing the existing timber wall and then the new wall, there's this additional space that's created on what I'll call your lower deck elevation. Are you going to, so that blue area, that shaded area, is that going to now be soil and plantings, or are you taking your railings out to that new, what I'll call wall? What kind of, how is that area filled in?
So, yeah, so the blue area is compacted gravel, what's required between the two walls. There will be a railing brought up to the front of the new wall. We have two kids, and so we get the importance of having a railing. As far as what is going to be on top of it, we were thinking possibly a vegetable garden in between the deck and the new wall. Again, it's, our main focus is securing the house, being able to afford this. And second, we will worry about cosmetics and landscaping and addressing cosmetic issues. But right now, there's no point to talk about cosmetics if we lose the house into the lake.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you for your presentation. Planner report?
Yes, Chair, Commissioners. This application seems to be kind of a poster child for the reasons why you have a variance process. The strict reading of the rule says that no improvements on this property. The entire property is within 150 feet of the lake, and most, if not all, of the house is within the 0 to 75 of the shore impact zone. So really no improvement to the property, which includes new retaining walls. In this situation, the retaining walls are necessary to support the existing retaining walls, which are in turn supporting the foundation of the house. There really isn't other options to preserve this house short of removing the house and relocating it to a different lot. In the cities, obviously that's not the goal of our ordinances here. This property was developed before shoreline regulations came into effect, so it wasn't a variance initially, and now we have to correct an issue. This property was built before shoreline regulations. So from the standards criteria that we review, the property is unique. We don't see the situation elsewhere where you have failing situations. You do have improvements in the shore impact throughout the city, not to this level, but that's not necessarily caused by the property owner in terms of what needs to happen here. So the property is unique. The property is being used in a reasonable manner. It's a single-family home in a single-family neighborhood in a single-family zone. So it's a reasonable use there. And then from an essential character of the neighborhood, the variance that allows these improvements in the shore impact zone, you're not going to see a lot of impact on the street side of the neighborhood, I'll call it. There will be visual impacts from the lake, and that's certainly to be considered. And therefore, if your comment about requiring staining or some sort of softening mechanism of the wall, I think that is appropriate given the goals of the ordinance, which is preserve kind of the natural view of shore from the lake. But we do recommend approval of this variance because all of those standards have been met. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Jeremy?
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Taylor?
So you mentioned there aren't any concerns with the other shorelines of the other properties. I'm assuming you've tested that or inspected that to ensure that, or is just, do we think we're gonna have other residents also having the same issue?
Mr. Chair, when I mentioned, that comment is more specific to, there are not a lot of other properties in the city, in the shoreland, that require replacement of retaining walls. I can't say with any certainty if the next door neighbors require that. They haven't come to us. You know, the soil conditions don't usually stop at the property line, so you can imagine maybe some challenge there in the future. But from a global perspective, in terms of interpretation and of the uniqueness throughout the city, we don't see this as being expected throughout the city.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Fart?
So these small little retaining walls that are closer to the water than the large timber one right now that got placed before this owner had the home, I'm speculating that maybe the original homeowner wanted to have a beach. There aren't very many beaches, at least in this vicinity around the pond or whatever. This home and maybe 2 houses down, I noticed. So I suspect maybe there was some flattening of the land near the water line to make room for sand and enjoy the beachfront. And then the water line kind of gets a little bit closer than maybe what it was originally permitted for even then. I don't think 150 feet or 75 feet I'm not worried about the numbers of setback, but is that in any way, I don't want to say contributing to the problem, but it apparently we're enhancing the dimension by removing those smaller walls so that the measurement now is going to be taken from the current water line to the new big block wall. Versus, I was just trying to fully understand what the applicant said and the staff report said about the nonconformity right now with the current zoning dimension is being measured between the water line, ordinary high water, and the first of those nonconforming small terrace retaining walls. Is that what I understood?
Mr. Chair, I think I follow. There is some dispute of what the ordinary high water line is, and that's where you measure setbacks from. It's from the ordinary high water line.
Sure.
DNR and some correspondence suggests it's
72, I think.
972.07 or something like that. Our documents for Mitchell Lake or Mitchell Lake is a slightly different number. So we're dealing with half of a foot difference, but it's always measured from the ordinary high water line landward, either 75 or 150, depending on the lake type. I specifically did not list a minimum dimension for that setback for this new wall because I recognize during the final construction or final design, there may be some fluidity to what that setback is, and I don't want to confine the applicant to a specific setback number. The whole property is in the 0 to 75.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to split hairs there.
Okay, I'm going to try asking my question in a different way. Whoever created more beach, and I think that the ordinary high water line probably crept up into this property more than when the house was originally constructed. Is that an issue?
Mr. Chair, I think part of our review, we recognize that the beach is wider than is permitted by code. And so part of our recommendation is, and it's shown on the plans, is to introduce some landscaping or some plantings into a portion of that beach area.
Sure.
On the southeast corner, kind of the hatched area on your plans. The applicant will be adding some landscaping to be approved by engineering staff to minimize the width of that beach. But in terms of the evolution of the shoreline area and maybe the water encroach into the property further, I hadn't heard that as a concern from engineering, and it's part of their review.
Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate that. And then, as long as you mentioned engineering, are we okay with leaving it's probably a green treated timber wall in place behind the big block wall? So that, years into the future, now that that's being completely, it's gonna have soil on both sides, or at least granular and soil on either side. Is that going to deteriorate, rot, or otherwise disintegrate and create a soft point for that sliding to reoccur 20 years from now?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, it's certainly possible, but I believe the soil anchors, and I'm sure their engineer could answer the question, but the soil anchors that are in there, there's usually a mesh in front of that and shotcrete or concrete facing that will be the structural component to hold those soil anchors in. So yeah, there could be a void behind it, but I would assume that there would be some material that would fall down into that. The soil anchors, I don't believe would move with that. It would just be some material that would collapse, and that timber would rot. But I don't know if you have any further thoughts on that, but
I'd be curious just to know if part of the deck is being supported by that backfill. You know where I'm going with it, right? Okay, if you have any comments on that, just to protect the owner's interest in making sure that 20 years from now, you don't have a little 8-inch failing of backfill.
Would you come forward, please?
Yeah, to your point, I mean, the deterioration of timbers, it's gonna take water, it's gonna take oxygen, and typically sunlight, right? That's gonna deteriorate your timbers faster and faster. By cutting off all three of those, we've got the backfill beneath the deck is currently P-rock, which isn't necessarily a good thing for us on the structural side, but it is good for drainage. Front side is clean stone, and then we're encapsulating or burying that timber wall. So we're in essence stopping the deterioration or halting deterioration of that timber to a point where I won't be around, I would think, as a young engineer, but we're in essence trying to petrify that material in place without allowing it to continuously deteriorate or break down.
Great.
Is the goal. And I will say from, you'd mentioned the shotcrete. We are using potentially shotcrete down at the bottom, but the fascia, we oversized the plates so that we're actually using the distribution area of multiple timbers around in order to more or less hold a large section back into the hillside.
Okay,
So if we have minor deterioration in one spot, that's encompassing, our plates are encompassing a larger tributary area
good.
to remain in place and not allow movement. So
That's great information. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so my last question, maybe it was for engineering, I don't know if it's for the applicant or not, was the attached letters on the staff report included some neighbors' letters offering support, but more importantly, offering access. So I don't know if our commission really cares how they're going to do their work, but they have very large and heavy equipment coming in. Are they planning on coming in from the street? Are they coming in by boat? And does it matter to the city as to any disturbances on adjacent property owners' property?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, we had made that comment because the plans indicate that there was walls on both sides, on both properties, I should say, on both sides, where there were some existing walls that had to be dismantled and rebuilt, that we asked for letters of permission, that those residents were okay with that, and that we got those letters. As far as access goes, I believe they're coming down onto their own property. They can confirm that, but there would be, I think it'd be on, would be the north side, the northwest side, I think is where the access is coming through. Is that correct?
So there is a neighbor to one side of my house that had rebuilt they had a timber wall as well. Approximately 5-7 years ago, they put a boulder wall in front of their retaining wall that was deteriorating as well. During the time of the construction, they had put a dirt ramp alongside their new wall. The neighbor has been kind enough to allow us to use it for the purpose of bringing equipment down, not for transporting material, but to bring the equipment down in order to start the work. They'll be passing the blocks from my property, on the side of my property, down to the equipment below in order to set up the wall. And then the neighbor's ramp will be used one more time to bring the equipment up. So we've been in discussions for a long time. He's expecting it. That's why he left the ramp on his property.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Mitty.
You know, the applicant mentioned they've worked with the DNR and watershed. Not sure which question this is directed at, but I just kind of want to inquire as to that process and how involved the city was with that. You know, for me, that's a big factor, that ensuring, you know, with the shoreline, that what they're putting in there, you know, as their potential plantings, and that we're not going to have like further erosion problems of the beach itself or anything like that. So it's just, there's some commentary on what that process involved.
I could take this, Rod. Engineering staff did work closely with the applicant and with the watershed district. Many of the comments that the plans reflect a lot of those previous conversations over the previous 4 years with the watershed district. And, you know, ultimately, when the building permit is going to be issued for the retaining wall, those same comments will carry through in terms of soil erosion, erosion mitigation, stormwater management, all of those things, which is why, you know, we didn't suggest trees or anything to soften the wall, because there's some concern with, you know, further disrupting of the soil in that area, and that comes from a shoreland management kind of standpoint. So they have been involved throughout the development of these plans.
Are they providing, you know, I don't know what kind of permits are needed for this, but are they also requiring permits from them as well as from the city?
They being the watershed district?
Yes, the watershed.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. This is a public hearing. If anyone would like to come forward and speak for or against this project, please do so now. Not seeing anyone, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing and have further discussion.
I move to close the public hearing.
All right, motion from Commissioner Taylor. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Second from Commissioner Farr. All those in favor of closing public hearing say aye.
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 Opposed? Public hearing is closed. Further discussion about this request.
Mr. Chair, I think this is like I said, a formidable project for the applicant, and it's too bad he has to go through this. I think this is a really good solution. I think they've thought through it. Time isn't on their hands, it sounds like, so I'm very interested in moving this along expeditiously so they can get on with their work as soon as possible. I recommended to the other commissioners that we entertain and approve this based on adding a condition, something along the lines of the applicant shall field stain the new retaining wall to simulate natural stone aesthetic, so that we don't have that silver gray concrete look on such a tall and long wall facing public waters. I think that's important, understanding that may add cost to the project. That's already a lot of money, but I think that's an important consideration on this project.
Commissioner Mitty.
In general, so I don't think there's a way that you can, you know, save this house from existing than this solution. You know, this is, I think, the only way to really fix this problem. So I think that, you know, a variance is warranted here. I think this is the best solution long-term, but for this, there's really no other economically feasible options. So I do support that. I agree with your comments on the wall and the aesthetics. I do think that's important, especially because this wall is going to be a lot bigger than what it looks like today, right? It's going to be pretty potentially massive. I question how specific we should get with the requirement around what the condition is. I think that I want to, help provide flexibility to the owner. And I mean, our, variance isn't even necessarily approving that exact product. For all we know, they could go and change it to a completely different looking thing. So how do we maybe establish a condition that kind of addresses the aesthetic without getting too specific and down a hole of if they're using that block wall, it is stained in a certain way. So I just want to throw that out there as I can't, I'm not coming up with anything off the top of my head, but I do think it's a, think about any buildings we're approving, right? There's certain percentages of class 1, 2 materials and requirements for windows and openings. And so this is the back of a building, but it's a huge facade. And so I think it's reasonable to, say architecturally speaking, that should be subject to some sort of design requirements. I just don't know what.
I agree with Commissioner Meddy and Commissioner Farr, but I have no idea what the cost implication of adding that requirement would be. And so I'm leery to put a condition on that would cause the homeowner to incur an unknown cost. And maybe that's just unknown to me. Maybe everybody else in this room has a feel for what it is, but I don't. And just to say, yeah, you got to add this without knowing what the implications are. As Commissioner Meddy said, on the other hand, it is important, the aesthetics of that wall are important. So some care to be taken with the aesthetics of that wall, I think is important. And how do we do that? Because, again, as I was reading this thing, I'm going, wow, there's a lot of dollar signs around this project for a homeowner. And we're all homeowners in Eden Prairie, so we all can be empathetic towards that situation. And my impression of this project is they're doing a bang-up job on it. I mean, they put the homework into it. They've looked hard at it. They've consulted everybody who needed to be consulted, hired geotech people, who seem to know what they're doing. So, I think we need to have some confidence in that they're going to do the right thing. But the aesthetics are important. So I didn't come up with a solution there. I just walked around it again.
Sure, and in fact, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair? Yeah, and in response to their comments, I concur with everything that's been said in response to my recommendation as well. There are basically two ways to colorize a retaining wall. One is to field stain or paint, if necessary, a surface. A painting doesn't last as long as staining. The other is to actually order the concrete pre-colorized. There's dry cast retaining walls, which we're familiar with, those small modular block walls that have been around for a long time. Those don't last more than maybe 30 years tops, but those come in a variety of colors. And in fact, this homeowner now has those small terrace wall modular blocks, those dry cast walls down near the beach already. And those are a natural color, brownish, tannish, what have you. So it kind of blends in with the beach, honestly. These larger block module retaining walls, which are necessary structurally to solve this problem, are poured with regular Portland cement gray concrete. And you can add colorant in the mix. When they're as deep as 3 feet, like the applicant says, and we do a fair amount of these walls ourselves, it's very expensive to pour a lot of that liquid colorant in there, and it is expensive. They're talking about getting a shallower unit customized for them, and that means less concrete. And so that colorant, if they wanted to add that colorant in the mix without having someone come back later and stain the wall with brushes and rollers, that could be an option for them. So there's 2 different techniques that are available. I would say that in any public-facing wall like this, a colorization of the silver gray concrete is most always required. That's not always the case, but if you drive around town, you don't see many of these walls that haven't gotten a color. And due to the sensitivity of it being on a private, or I'm sorry, a public waterway and other neighbors looking at their property. That's why I thought it was an important point to make, despite, there is a known cost for it. I'm not going to throw out a cost. They can find out how much it costs and whatever, but they're going to such a great extent, like you said, to do a good job. It's the right product for the job. They're already suggesting a textured face on it already, which is an added cost over flat. So, so I didn't think it was a reach, but I'm cautious about scope creep for the applicant as well. But I just thought that the colorization here was really important, personally.
That's helpful explanation.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so
Commissioner,
I've, my background has been working along the rivers, Mississippi River, and we have a lot of docks and retaining walls helping support the earth. And I know once you see movement, like the homeowner is seeing with the deck coming away from the house, there's a lot more probably going on than what you can really see. And I agree with the aesthetics of the wall, the coloring, but I think it's important to know that once that movement is happening, it's going to continue to happen until there's a fix, which clearly the homeowner has. But you definitely, I don't know if there's can be a delay within the project because of the coloring of the background or the concrete. And then, like it was mentioned by the homeowner, it's about saving the home so that we don't lose his home. So I'm in support of the project.
any other thoughts about the stain there?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Ready?
I think you explaining that helped me kind of realize it a little further, that without any sort of color, and this is just like the color of raw concrete, very gray. And most all retaining walls we see are brownish or natural colors stained in some way. So I do think that it is an important point. And again, I think it just goes back to how we might come up with this condition that would allow needed flexibility. And maybe it's something to the effect of the condition being that the applicant must work with city staff on final approval of the finish of the wall, that, help, something about
Relative
in natural
to
color,
aesthetics.
whether color, aesthetics of it, to that effect. I'm not good right now at coming up with the exact language, but maybe someone here can. But I'm just thinking, again, is there a way to kind of leave it up to city staff to work with applicant, and so it doesn't have to come back to us, right? But them approving the final design of the wall with those comments in mind is sort of what I'm thinking.
How do you feel about that, Commissioner Farr?
To Commissioner Mendy's point, if I personally had to prioritize the aesthetic, I would put color over texture because of the long-range views of the wall from the neighbors across the pond. And so I agree, flexibility is great. So I would like to think about, crafting some language that would, in fact, maybe, as much as we don't want to do this to you, put it on your shoulders instead of ours. But, we've got big pants here, so let's figure it out. I think that if we say that we want the applicant to work with staff to provide an adequate coloration and texture and/or texture suitable for the visual environment that it's in. And that word suitable, okay, carries along with it, I think, the baggage of what the neighbors have next door, what the people in the public waterways will look when they boat by. And if we can't agree upon the suitability here amongst the six of us, well, then it's on the planners' shoulders to do that with the applicant. I feel strongly that I don't want to end up with a silver gray wall, 18 feet high and by 100 feet long, whatever it is, facing public water.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Meddy.
I was feverishly jotting down notes as you were saying that, so I actually think I have, if there's no further discussion, I could propose the motion unless anyone else wants to say anything more.
Well, does yours include and/or colorization
Oh,
and/or
oh yeah,
texture?
oh yeah, I wrote it all down.
And/or, right?
And dash or.
And/or.
Slash.
Okay.
I did the same thing, and mine was even a little softer than and/or.
What was,
Well, my wording was have appropriate visual aesthetics of the wall consistent with the local environment. And that way, it's open to a variety of solutions. Your experience says they're two pretty obvious solutions. So I don't think we're negating that. But if they got creative on, if the engineer along with the homeowner gets creative and comes up with an appropriate solution, that was just an idea.
Commissioner Kirk, I would comment that I liked Commissioner Farr's use of the word suitable as opposed to your word of consistent. So if it's suitable with the surrounding environment as opposed to consistent, I think that's actually a little bit more just because what if everybody else has a gray block wall, then you don't want it consistent with all the other gray block walls. But but yeah, I like that verbiage.
That's acceptable to me, for sure.
Thank you for helping me with the wordsmithing.
Jeremy, with that condition, is that enough direction for you?
Yes, it is.
Does that mean I have to do the motion? I already did one motion. Okay. Move to approve a variance to allow a series of retaining walls within the shoreline setback and to exceed the 30% limit of hard cover within the shoreline overlay district as represented in the February 13th, 2023 staff report, with the additional requirement that the applicant will work with staff to have appropriate visual aesthetics of the wall suitable to the local environment.
Motion from Commissioner Kirk. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Meddy. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Would anyone like to abstain? All right. Looks like passes. Good luck moving forward. Thank you for your diligence on this project. All right, do we have a planner's report this evening?
None tonight.
Any members' reports?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
if I may.
Commissioner Farr.
Every year, our city council invites each board and commission to a city council workshop to go over the prior year's accomplishments and future year goals. In your absence in January, I was tapped to represent our planning commission at that council workshop, like I said, mid-January. And they wanted me to pass along to all of us their gratitude and thanks for a job well done in 2022. And their interest in providing sustainable solutions in the future for our development projects, remodel projects, and everything like that. They're very much behind EV and solar and any initiative we can continue to urge the applicants to incorporate into their projects to have green goals, sustainability, and moving forward with that. So again, I just wanted to share their gratitude for your all work, and that's all.
Thanks, Commissioner Farr. Thanks for covering, too. All right, any other members' reports? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn the meeting?
All right, all those in favor say aye, or second,
Aye.
I mean?
Second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Yes.
After the public hearings close,